January 2017, a new hero was introduced to Aurora. She exploded onto the scene as a strong initiator with one of the most powerful ultimates ever. But just a few weeks later, she got nerfed to the ground and went from really OP to borderline useless. Can she be as impactful in Predecessor pre-nerf but not as broken? I have some ideas for her. Let's go.
Tried my best just to catch a fucking smile, but for now I see myself ain't hitting the 35. Been awake 4 days.
So let's talk about Aurora. Right off the bat, here are the 3 mistakes Paragon made with her, and I'll explain each mistake later on. Number 1, they went way too overboard with the nerfs. 2, she didn't even technically meet the design goals as a geometry hero. And finally 3, she desperately needed another basic ability that does damage. Disclaimer, this is all just my opinion, of course. Let's start off with her big fat nerf, right? I think a few of us can agree that Aurora had one of the most broken debuts in Paragon's history. I mean, she was practically a tier 0 hero at the time. Like, if your team didn't have an Aurora and none of your growth/order members had cleanse or debuff card in their deck, y'all were fucked. It was only a matter of time when people realized they needed to create separate decks for their main heroes in order to counter an enemy Aurora. I want you to think about that for a second. In fact, if you mained heroes that weren't growth or order affinities, well, guess what? Now you have to learn. And that was so dumb. Once people realized this, countering Aurora was much easier, but at that point, she already defined the meta more or less if she's forcing everybody to create side decks and learn new heroes just to face her. So after about 6 weeks or so, Epic nerfed the shit out of her, and yeah, that was it. She became so weak it was pointless to play her in offlane when there are so many other stronger options to choose from. Also, Aurora had the kit to be a decent jungler, but not quite. No sustain and dog shit jungle clear. Epic never really properly balanced her, and the only reason she ever saw play post V42 was because of cards like Shadow Dancer, Veil Stepper, and that's not a good sign when a hero is viable when they have a specific build through items, but not through their kit. And this brings me to my next point, her kit. But first, what is Aurora's identity?
The entire idea of this character is she's meant to be kind of like a geometry area control kind of hero. Paragon is a vertical game, so we have all this great verticality, but we didn't have a geometry control hero yet, and I wanted there to be one. So the design goal behind Aurora was, what if we had a hero that could just make walls in the game?
A powerful frontline initiator, Aurora uses the cold to freeze her enemies and take what she pleases. Utilize your mobility to remain elusive and set up powerful initiations.
Okay, so her identity is a geometry hero that initiates. She initiates alright, but is she really a geometry hero though? Creating this ring on the ground that roots isn't geometry in my opinion. If geometry means walls, then the only time she can realistically make one is when she uses her glacial charge vertically. And I guess you can argue she creates another wall with her frozen statue, but that's not enough to call her a geometry hero though. Like, she needs more. Why did they just give her an ability that allows her to just, oh I don't know, spawn ice from the fucking ground?
The original version of her, like, she could actually do a wall, like, that would just, like, she just cast it would just come out from her, and it would just go out. You could, like, block off stuff, but we found in gameplay that, especially because of our camera and the 3D space and the action place, and the fact that not everyone's going to be the best player ever in the world with this hero, it was causing bad gameplay because you could just put walls in the middle of team fights and screw up your teammates, and, like, there's always going to be an element of that whenever you're playing a high-skill hero, but it was just super all the time, and there was really no escaping someone who didn't know how to play the walls correctly. So we decided to go with a wall that was a little bit more forgiving and also not as like, okay, I've dropped this wall, this team fight is over, which is kind of like what we were trying to avoid.
I mean, I guess, but why not just label her an expert hero then to let new players know? She needed this ability, and I hope Predecessor does this for her if they agree that Aurora's identity is in fact an initiating geometry hero. This brings me to the third mistake Epic made, not giving her another damaging ability that creates walls.
You can even use it to jungle, but it's kind of dicey. Like, you have to like aggro the creeps and like kite them into it, so it's kind of a pain, but it's pretty cool.
That's another thing. Having another source of damage would have allowed her clear jungle better. This ability would match her identity, complement her role as this initiating geometry hero, and her full kit would have allowed the player to have a playstyle that fits this intended role. But luckily, all heroes in Pred have passives. An idea I had was moving her frozen statue to her passive. So basically it'll behave similarly to Kalari's passive, but instead of a triple jump, Aurora does a double jump and drops her frozen statue after a certain cooldown. You know what I mean? And this is the fun part where we all kinda share our ideas for a new ability. What will her new RMB be? Her new right mouse button? So let's remember that she was originally intended to create walls, but she also needed another source of damage. So the obvious answer, in my opinion, would be to give her the ability the devs originally tried. Simply have her target a spot on the ground and this giant wall of ice just spawns out. I have one last idea to add to this ability before I wrap up this video. There's a way to make this new ability combo with the rest of her kit. Watch this explanation of her ultimate first.
So like the way the cryocism works is just you use the ability and it does damage to everyone in a fairly generous area around you. Anyone that's been affected by it's going to slowly turn to ice over like a couple of seconds, like 1.5 seconds. After that period, they freeze, they're briefly stunned, and then they explode. Anyone that gets damaged from that explosion also turns to ice, also explodes. So if you do it in an area where there's a lot of people, you're going to do a lot of damage.
So the more targets she hits with her ult, the more effective. So here's my idea. Her new right mouse button, that wall, let's say it stays on the map for an X number of seconds, right? I mean, it's going to anyway if it's going to be an obstacle on the map. Now remember her passive, how she creates an obstacle, aka her statue? What if her statue and her wall count as targets for her ult? There's one more thing I can add to this. If she uses her glacial charge and rams into any of her created obstacles, they break apart into pieces and are now targetable for her ult. So the natural gameplay would be, I initiate by casting a wall, I dash in and break the ice, so to speak. I ult, I go to the key targets like a carry or a caster or whatever, and I root them down. I think this will make Aurora impactful again. But that's enough out of me. I want to know what you guys think. Tell me what you think about the changes and issues I mentioned about Aurora. Do you agree? Do you disagree? As they're just my opinions. What are your thoughts? And I hope to see you guys out there on the battle arena very soon. Early access is within the next 28 weeks.